Hello, everyone. On behalf of GSA, we'd like to welcome you to this webinar on cyber awareness for facility personnel. Today, we are going to focus on providing for facility personnel with an overview of some of the key roles and competencies that they need to address cybersecurity as it relates to facility-related control systems. We're going to focus today primarily on existing facilities and touching on risk assessments and how cybersecurity applies to our facility folks out there. I'm Wanda Lenkwich. I own Chinook Systems. We're a facility engineering firm specializing in cybersecurity for operational technology, and happy to be here with you today.
And I'm Daryl Hegley, work for the Department of Defense, currently Director of Mission Assurance and Cyber Deterrence. Been focused on operational technology and control system cybersecurity for a number of years. So glad you're here with us. And so for the next 8 hours,
8 hours? Did you bring dinner?
No, didn't. 20 minutes. We're going to provide a brief overview of operational technology and how it's also called control systems, industrial control systems, SCADA, Internet of Things, and describe how cyber is relevant to your role and discuss a couple scenarios that apply cyber competencies relevant to the facility manager, energy manager, and building operators. So let's get to it.
Sounds good. All right, well, you know, cyber starts with people.
Absolutely, and there's decades of evidence that shows that if an organization invests in training for its people and they take it, it will result in less compromises and downtime. It is critical to realize that most training that is available for folks in this space is really focused on the systems themselves and the technical aspects of running that equipment. Yet, despite today's incessant cyber contested environment, cyber training is rare for the system owners and operators. Yet they are the ones on the front lines of defense, these systems, and are the skilled experts depended to relay any problems ranging from anomalies to failures. And, you know, I realize I've had a number of people come up and say, well, are you expecting me to be able to stop malicious cyber attacks from nation states? No, that's not the case. The goal here is for you as the experts to take training and inform and guide the cyber folks when there's an incident and being able to describe detection of problems and be part of detecting those problems, recommended ways to mitigate them, and show them proper ways of recovery. Because they are not, a lot of those folks are not going to be skilled in being able to do that.
And each person has their own role, and their roles are different depending on what they see every day.
Absolutely. So as a summary, the differences between traditional information technology and control systems or operational technology. I really like this slide. Several folks use it to show kind of one of the basic difference. So for information technology, for your email and most communication systems, it's really important to understand that the information is not coming from an unauthorized person. So only the people authorized to view it have access to it. So for example, your bank records, only you should be able to see the bank records.
So therefore, focus on confidentiality.
Correct. But on control systems and operation technology, the focus is more on availability, making sure that the systems are up all the time, reliably running, and you're able to access them for upgrades or updates or emergency operations. But what we found is a lot of these systems have not been patched regularly. Security has not been on the forefront. And we've found that adversaries have been on these networks for well over 200 days. And many of these systems are still running Windows XP, Windows 7, and again, a lot of operating systems that are no longer supported.
Yeah, Yes, when we do discovery, we find a lot of Windows XP systems and a lot of embedded technology. On a recent assessment that we did, we found an exploit of an audio-visual system that had been going on for we don't really know how long. And the operational technology facilities people weren't monitoring it, the IT people weren't monitoring it, so we really don't know how long it went undiscovered. And the interesting thing was is as soon as it was discovered, it was immediately taken care of, but we don't know how long it was actually open to
Right.
an adversary.
And that's a problem with many of these systems we're going to get into. So many government and non-government buildings, systems, facilities have all these different types of systems on it. Many in the Department of Defense will have a lot of these. And I was wondering if you see your system, the one that you're running and operating here. And do you know if that system is a standalone system? Is it isolated or separated from any others, or is it connected? Is it connected to your email systems? Is it connected to other supporting systems? And system safety and reliability typically comes with owning and managing these systems, and you've been responsible for that. But what about cyber, right? So some contend it's just another type of hazard, and others have claimed it's totally different. So a lot of questions are who is best to secure these systems from a cyber perspective? The facility manager, energy manager, or building operator?
And the interesting thing about these systems is that every control system is different. Every building is different. Every control system is different. It's unique to the specific application of the facility and the mission. So they're very much unlike IT systems, which have a very standard way of actually configuring them, configuring the networks, etc. And our control systems for facilities are very unique with unique operating systems, unique vendors. So every building is going to have multiple control systems in them that need to be addressed.
So I would imagine that would make things a lot easier for an adversary to try and get to them if they're not standardized, not protected, and not followed up on. So the next slide here talks a little bit of some history of the threats that have occurred over the past several years. But one of the things I keep hearing is, well, but Daryl, these really sound awful, but I don't own a utility system, and I am not an oil and gas, or these are much larger in scope and scale than what I manage. And potentially they're not sure that their systems are being exploited. But as in your example, it wasn't until you actually look or you have something on your system to be able to determine whether that is being exploited. One of the most recent advisories came out from the National Security Agency and said that there were 25 exploits that had already been announced that said, here are the patches you should take, and take them now, that have not been patched and continue to be exploited. So even after information's out there, perhaps it's not getting to the right people, and or maybe they don't know that the security advisors are there and how to secure those. But we're going to show you how to do that a little bit later.
Yes.
Okay. And a report that came out in 2019 kind of reviewed a number of these significant issues that occur in operation technology and control systems. For access, as many of you know, there's only one of you, and yet you're responsible for a number of systems, number of buildings on a campus or whatever. You can't be there and monitoring them all, and so we are making them web accessible. Well, a lot of those aren't secure. And it's not that you're just able to turn the power off or change the temperature inside but you could really affect operations and data inside any of the buildings, whether it's aligned to utilities, hospitals, banks, or factories, or those sort of things. And designing to secure principles, these systems a lot of times are just made to function and not from a hardcore security protection way.
Yeah, and very much historically, control systems design has been determined to be, from an IT and cybersecurity standpoint, relatively weak. And that's related to the different types of hardware, software, and network designs. So as we're connecting more and more of these devices and more of these facilities, we're actually creating a larger threat landscape with all of the connected devices.
Right.
We're creating more systems that can be exploited by the adversary, and that rate is very much outpacing the rate that we can actually train people to maintain the control systems.
Yeah, I've been amazed at just what engineers can design, but it's also kind of interesting that in many of these places we'll see the password written down on the screen or under the keyboard because somebody may have to come in and make a change, and they don't want to have to figure out who's got the password and that sort of thing. So that speaks to that bullet that says a lot of these things are just not built secure from the beginning. But again, as end users of these systems, they've typically been responsible for safety and security. But unfortunately, from a cyber perspective, that has not been the case. So as we take a look at if there are assessments that are happening, cyber assessments that have happened or going to happen, that you can be a part of, there are a number of different things that would be helpful for you to contribute and help verify that are in place as they do one of these cyber assessments. There are about 4 different things that have come from a number of assessments that have been done by various parts of the government and industry, in terms of making sure you identify connections, devices, know the vendor support and relationships you have there, some basic hygiene on passwords, and understand the incident reporting and threat awareness that we're going to share with how to get more access to.
And cybersecurity is expansive. It is a huge industry, and so you can very easily get overwhelmed with a lot of things, and a lot of people don't have a lot of time. So if they're going to be taking their training,
right,
they want to make sure that it's focused in an area that will actually get them some bang for their buck, right? And so what we've tried to do here is narrow it down to a few areas of competencies of what the roles can do,
right,
and where they can go to get some further awareness.
Excellent. So let's first talk about facility managers.
All right. So facility managers, they have a pretty broad role. They're responsible for people, processes, and technology. So they have to be able to work with all of the various different stakeholders, with various different systems, and then they have to pull all of that together in priority-driven type programs,
right,
and then flow it down to their people to get them properly trained. So it's they have a really large role to play.
You've done a number of different assessments. Have you seen where that integration and that role without cyber has been an issue?
Oh yeah, and a lot of times when we go into to various different agencies or commercial clients, what we're seeing is that a lot of these stakeholders have never been in the room together. And so when they start seeing how how each one of them touches various different systems and how they interact with each other, then they start pulling together as a team to
Right.
work together to strengthen their programs. So we see things like property managers working with facility operators and maintainers. We see people in charge of security and physical security, access control. Those folks have to interact. And then we see things like event management, where they've installed some kind of standalone system
Right.
that nobody else knows about. And once they all get together in a room, they start sharing information, and it all leads to a stronger security posture.
And that's great. No, and I've heard, though, a lot of engineers tend to be more introverted than extroverted. So I've also heard, well, you're asking essentially an introvert trying to bring a whole bunch of people together. Perhaps that could be challenging, but the key, though, is to protect those systems. That is one of the most important things that needs to happen, is bring that team together.
But the facility manager always says that, what keeps him up at night, he or she, is that they don't necessarily know who's looking at their systems. So some of the technology that they implement is network discovery technology and continuous monitoring. And so they, as part of the risk management and assessment process, typically will discover a network. And both the facility manager and IT support will be there. And so we tend to find things that they didn't even know they had.
Wow.
So it's really interesting to be able to implement this technology and to be able to then see what you haven't been able to put your eyes on before, because it's not easy to actually do a physical inventory of some of these devices.
Right.
So automating the process helps, but the facility manager also has to know what those tools and technology are, which ones are better than others, and which ones will meet their needs for their facilities.
There's a lot of opportunity for them to learn about those resources, where to get those, and a lot of it, I think, can start from some of the GSA offerings that we're going to share later.
Mm-hmm. And what we see on the screen here is also published by Homeland Security. It's Defense in-Depth Strategies, and it goes through all of the various different stages of implementing a Defense in-Depth program. So it's a very, very useful document.
Great
folks.
place to start.
Great place to start.
Next is energy managers.
So the unique thing with energy managers is that they are looking at lots of systems, and they're trying to find energy conservation measures and reduce utility costs. And so they're looking at a lot of interconnected systems.
And what might be an issue with that?
Well, especially with systems who have gone through the risk management framework process and have achieved authority to operate. As soon as you start touching those systems, then you can compromise that authority.
How long does it take to go through one of those systems? Is that something that's done in a week, a month?
No. The risk management framework is a 6-step process, which typically takes at least approximately 18 months to accomplish. And it has a number of people involved in it. They have to gather all of kinds of information on hardware and software, develop 18 different policies and procedures that all then culminate together and get entered into a system called EMAS. And the government then has authorities who come out and review the implementation and all of the security documentation, and then will grant an authority to operate.
So if you're going to do new construction or updated construction, are there any references that can be pointed to for them to figure out what security controls to put in place?
Sure. Yeah, there are. So we have to make sure that there's that all of the systems, just for federal specifically, our primary guideline are the Unified Facility Guide Specs and the Unified Facility Criteria. So the UFC that governs cybersecurity is 4010.06, and it explains all of the criteria that have to be met if you are if you're installing a new control system.
And so these requirements are the same, like if you're going to put new windows in a building or doors or electrical systems. So these just happen to be specific to cyber.
Yeah, each discipline has their own criteria. And the cyber UFC was just recently developed, was it not?
I think about 2-3 years ago, absolutely.
Yeah. So awareness of that is very critical for facilities folks.
And the contract language should include those requirements when you bid what those systems are going to be.
Yes.
Okay, so last one, building operators.
So the building operators are unique because they're the first line of defense, right? They're the folks that are actually sitting at the computers and monitoring the systems and monitoring the operations of the systems. So they're the ones that are seeing the typical day-to-day operations, and they're also seeing and interacting with vendors and contractors every day in the maintenance of those systems. So the more a building operator can know about their inventory that they have and the way that it operates, the better off that they're going to be if they see an anomaly in that system. The more awareness they'll have from a reporting standpoint.
In some of your assessments, have you come across any situations to where they didn't recognize of a system or something that was on the system?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they typically tend to know what's on their system, but they generally don't dig in to a deeper level to determine if there's any vulnerabilities with them. So the example that's on our screen right now is one of the facilities that we were in had a CCTV system that was the Hikvision, and there's various different models of those cameras that are exploitable. They have back doors to the Chinese, which we don't really want to.
That's not good.
Yeah, not good. So, but it's only applicable to certain models, because what we're finding with a lot of the suppliers and vendors is that some of their earlier models of equipment and systems were vulnerable, but as they become aware, when they upgrade their systems and create their next versions of their technology, they fix those vulnerabilities. So it becomes very important for a building operator not only to know what the make is, but the model number and the firmware and all of that, because one camera in one building could be fine, but in a different building it could be vulnerable.
So really knowing your inventory, the hardware, software, firmware, the vendor that's supporting it, the agreement on whether they are doing the updates, whether you're responsible, all those sound like a lot of things that the building operator needs to know.
Yeah. So knowing your inventory, and then knowing how to actually recover if there does happen to be an issue. So.
And also a place to get where all these vulnerabilities are and how to get that information. You can get that from DHS.
Yeah, you can sign up for alerts, and you can watch the alerts coming in as the cyber databases get updated. They're continuous 24/7 updates. And then there is a national vulnerability database also that has all of the vulnerabilities worldwide that have been discovered to date. So building operators can access that website. It doesn't require a password or anything like that. And they can do a search criteria for their equipment that they have to see if there's any known vulnerabilities. And typically the database will also identify how to mitigate those vulnerabilities.
That's great. And so I know the price is right. It's free. And I also know that, for those folks who tinker with these systems or are very familiar with them, and they discover their own vulnerabilities, even if you have some offline and you're testing patches and things before you bring it onto a system, if you find vulnerabilities, you're able to submit them yourself into those two databases. All right, so wrapping this up, every week, almost daily, we see news stories on cyber exploits. And, I've often heard it's not a matter of whether you experience an exploit, but when. So I'd like to review the key points that we share with you today, that adversaries, they are going to be looking for every weak spot available. And as we talked earlier, all these different systems, some connected, some not connected, sometimes the government's responsible, sometimes the commercial. Knowing all that is key to understanding where some of those vulnerabilities are. You brought up a couple great points about how the relationships we have with the vendors, whether they're doing the patching, whether you're responsible, whether the patches address a security issue or just a performance issue. Mm-hmm. And then being able to keep on top of the alerts.
Mm-hmm. And we have to also look and make sure that our vendors bringing equipment in, if they're plugging into your network, you have to make sure that the equipment that they're using has been vetted from a cybersecurity standpoint, so they don't bring and introduce vulnerabilities into your network.
So a good practice I've seen by some government folks are you scan your own laptop, and then you have the vendor put their software on your good laptop and secure laptop, and then they use that. Mm-hmm. So that's an option there.
Definitely a good practice, yes.
Another one, so verify vulnerabilities. Even though you might see that on a list, it may not apply to you, or you guys have something in place that to where that's not accessible. There are a number of different just basic things that can be in place to help make sure some minimal cyber functionality and best practices, and and those resources are available. Many of them free. And get into the habit and know who to contact if there is something that seems suspicious or anomalous activity on your network. Who is it that you contact? Perhaps do some rehearsals that come up with a scenario that something happens. Go through that entire process, determine who internally and who externally needs to know about this.
Yeah, the tabletop exercises are very, very important because there's multiple people who typically have to be involved if there is an incident, and also make sure you have backups.
All right, and the key reason we're here today, thankfully to GSA, is there are a number of different resources that they provide, and here is the web link to get you there.
Mm-hmm. So GSA is setting up a website for resources. They are linking it to competencies for each one of the roles within facilities. So this is inclusive of the facility manager, the energy manager, and the building operator. And so they are actively building the framework, and the framework is in place. And so as the competencies are published, they will be adding more and more resources and more training that's specifically associated with each one of the roles and the competencies that they need to have for cyber for OT.
That is great. And I know there are many of you who really want to dig into this more and be part of learning more about cybersecurity, and that's fantastic. So here, feel free to send Wanda unlimited numbers of questions. Oh, wait, no. Send them to the GSA folks. Again, thank you for your time and attention.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. And this last slide is a list of the resources, including GSA's Facility Management Institute that is going to house all of their training. And we look forward to supporting you in further webinars and potentially further training. So thank you very much for your time.
Good luck out there.
Bye-bye.
Bye.